Fate. Souls and Singularities Chapter 124–125. Chapter 124. A thoroughly miserable time. Torin stared across the tents before him, then reached up and rubbed the bridge of his helmet as he exhaled. The wind still howled around them, but the thin barrier he had planted, supported by Siyu's runes, was able to keep the worst of it from affecting them. It had been at least an hour since the attack, and making camp this early hadn't been something he was planning on doing, but granting the people some rest took priority, especially after their ordeal. Moving through the camp, he made his way towards the largest tent where those from Chaldea plus their newest arrival were currently waiting. The tent itself was easily spotted, not just because of the size, but also because of the towering form of Berserker that stood guard outside of it. The metal servant stared out across the small camp without making a single noise. If Torin were to be truthful, he had his suspicions about Berserker judging by the way they had fought the dragon, but he wasn't going to be throwing around accusations just yet. Not until he was genuinely certain about their true nature. As Torin approached the tent, the Berserker turned their head to face him and remained silent in their vigil. The caster approached without fear, noticing the faint light shining from the entrance to the tent and looking back towards the servant. Berserker made no effort to impede his approach, so he elected to ignore the servant in favor of communing with the master. They had much to talk about as it currently stood, not least of all because of the sudden arrival of their newest traveling guest. Reaching out, he grasped the flap of the tent and pulled it to the side before stepping in. The interior was entirely different from the tents of the Norsemen. The actual design itself was different as well. Some manner of strange clear fabric acted as windows to the house-shaped design of the large cover. The actual tent was more akin to a box rather than a thin sheet of fabric kept up with wooden pegs. The occupants turned their heads and looked towards him. All except one individual. Olga was still staring towards the strange glass lamp that illuminated the tent. Her expression was perfectly blank, even as the still unnamed servant hung back in the corner of the room not far from her. The woman, presumably a lancer, turned to face him and tilted her head ever so slightly as he stared at her briefly before returning his attention to the leader of the Chaldeans. The last of the wounded have been settled. Torin spoke in a toneless voice, and we have completed our count of those lost in the attack. How many? Olga asked, still looking at the lamp. 35. Torin responded with, another 28 remained injured. We lost 3 horses in the attack as well. Out of? 183. Torin exhaled, reaching up and rubbing his large hand over the top of his helm before grasping it and pulling it free from his body. Long silver hair flowed down from his aged face. Matted gray beard covered his lower features and large bushy eyebrows furrowed ever so slightly. A considerable number, to be sure. What of the people? Marie asked, turning away from the director and looking at Torin directly with clear worry in her voice. How are they feeling? Torin remained silent for a few moments as he debated how best he could answer that question. Norsemen regarded dying in battle as a great honor, but considering this battle consisted of being torn apart at the joints by wild animals rather than facing down opposing warriors, it was difficult to find any real honor in it. Happy to still be alive, he responded after a few moments. As for your allied servant, the Black Knight? Still kicking. Siyu supplied that time, sitting in the middle of the room near the director and looking towards the lancer from the corner of his eye for a few moments before turning his head back to Torin and giving the man a half smile. Battle continuation for you. Lets you take a hell of a beating and keep on walking. Then he will recover? Give it time, but yeah, I could probably speed it up with a couple of runes though. Siyu responded before he grimaced and looked at Olga. Won't lie though, that little stunt against the enemy servant drained me pretty good though. So you need a master then? Olga surmised without a hint of emotion in her voice. She then looked up towards the caster and raised an eyebrow. Whatever happened to being cursed to having no master compatibility? We're up shit creek without a paddle, I believe is the modern expression. Siyu responded with after taking a long sigh. I don't think either of us are really in a position to start complaining about our choice of allies. The caster paused before raising an eyebrow at her in response. If you want to complain about it. Fine. Olga snapped at him, extending her hand. Just get it over with then. Siyu frowned, extending his own armored hand. Don't need to sound so bitter about it. Shouldn't I? Olga quietly grumbled to herself as she felt the connection forge with the caster, who took his hand back and looked towards the lancer in the corner. Olga followed his vision and similarly stared at the recent arrival. Who are you anyway? I confess my own curiosity. Torin spoke, crossing his arms and staring at the white-haired woman in the corner. Not that I do not hold gratitude for your timely rescue. You shouldn't, the Lancer responded with a curt voice, her expression shifting ever so slightly into a light frown. I was there looking for someone but didn't find him. She looked away from them. Saving your lives just seemed the most sensible course of action at the time. Is that so? Torin raised a lone eyebrow before it lowered and he shrugged his shoulders. Whatever your reasons are, we would be dead without you, so the gratitude remains. That being said, I am surprised you are still here rather than having left us to pursue this man you seek. Siyu hummed to himself as he cracked his fingers. She probably won't do that. The Lancer turned her eyes upon him and narrowed them in slight interest. Because she figured we'll eventually go out looking for the dragons once again and it's safer to travel in a group. Well, safer for her at least. The Lancer tilted her head. Have we met before? You seem oddly familiar. Hey, I like to imagine I'd have remembered a woman as beautiful as you. Siyu snorted, shaking his head. No, you and I have never met before. Lowering his hands, he placed them on the ground and turned his body to face her. Still though, you can't have been here long. Bet it was only a couple of hours you were summoned before you stumbled across us. Were you heading north anyway, or was that just a coincidence? The woman stared at him in silence for a few moments before her lips thinned. You're correct. Upon my summoning I deduced where I was as well as some small details about the situation from what limited information was provided for me. A crisis that revolves around dragons in Scandinavia. It was during the storm I had been summoned, therefore I was forced to venture out in hopes of navigating it. Bet that was fun. See you have a hollow laugh which no one mirrored. He looked over his shoulder towards the director to see if she had anything further to say. The woman was still staring at the lamp in front of her. Psst. Lass. See you whisper shouted to her. Still she made no effort to speak, likely not even hearing him to begin with. Pale rose. Nero leaned in from behind, her hand gently nudged her shoulder. Olga jolted ever so slightly and looked up to see several heads facing her. What? Perhaps you should speak further to this new servant. You're the master, so the decisions still rest with you. Oh, right. Olga quietly muttered to herself before shifting her expression onto the Lancer. So you want to travel with us to find this person you are looking for? Lancer nodded. And when you find them, Olga asked further, what will you do? I will greet them, then I will try to kill them. The Lancer responded as though the answer was obvious. However, she couldn't quite hide the somber tone to her words, as though the sentence itself was saddening to her. Yikes. Romani's head flashed up, the man staring at the Lancer with a raised eyebrow. Talk about a lively greeting. He offered a weak chuckle, then paused and looked down when no one laughed. Anyway, I've confirmed that there aren't any signs of incoming wyverns, dragons or servants around you. The ones who attacked you are either dead or have retreated away. The man paused once again. I can't imagine why though. Is the answer not clear? Nero grinned. They saw the manner in which we bested the great dragon and felt as though they could not take on such superior numbers. See you blinked once. The big guy in the black armor is basically your muscle, right? The caster asked before jerking a thumb over his shoulder. Next to tall, silent and metal. He looked around and got nods from the Chaldeans. Seeing as how the guy got knocked on his ass and probably would have died if he was a normal servant in less than 10 seconds, I figure that there's something else going on here. I concur. Torin grimly nodded his head. The opposing servant was fresh, having soundly bested Tarkus in single combat and taking one of Sidiar's mightiest blows without so much as a scratch before advancing on us. Considering we were still tired from battling the dragon, I suspect that the servant would have made short work of us, even with Lancer's timely arrival. So they left for a reason. Olga realized with a grim understanding, we're only still alive at the whim of the servant and whomever their master is. Yes. Torin nodded his head. Judging by the display of power the servant showcased with those spears of light she carved through the ground and cleaved through the sky with, I suspect their magical energy was superior to my own. Looked like some sort of mana burst. Siyu crossed his arms, drumming his fingers over his bracers. Big explosions of raw magical energy from your person. Very risky to do if you aren't careful, so someone's been practicing a lot. Rebounded primordial runes with them too. That earned Lancer's attention, turning to him and tilting her head. You know how to cast runes? Siyu shrugged. I dabble. Called down a big lightning storm on them and the bastard just let out a big explosion. A sigh escaped him. So yeah, getting up close and personal to fight them just ain't going to work out unless you can match that magical energy, and none of us are really like that. I see, Nero frowned, crossing her arms and nodding her head. This paints a rather grim picture indeed. But then why would the servant retreat if they had us cornered so thoroughly, if what you say is true? Perhaps their master is a coward who feared their servant might be injured. Cu paused for a moment. Could be. He admitted, might have also been assessing our strength, figured that once Lancer showed up. He jerked his head at the woman, and helped take out the dragon. They had seen enough and had them pull back. Might have also seen the sheer number of servants and decided not to risk it. Then we might have been saved by ignorance as well. Torin raised an eyebrow. Or someone overly cautious. Lancer was a recent addition and her strengths were not known. Perhaps we are dealing with someone who does not enjoy battling the unknown and might seek to probe us again at a later time. Romani chose that moment to speak up. That servant could have been the one leading the Singularity as well. They arrived commanding dragons and wyverns. That isn't something normal servants can just do. He pointed out, gesturing across the screen towards Marie. Remember in France? The alternate Jean was only able to command Fafnir because she was in possession of the Holy Grail and through him could command wyverns. You believe the servant's superiority might be because they held the Grail? Olga looked towards him, her voice shifting ever so slightly. What did the screens tell you? Romani paused for a moment. They didn't show evidence of the Holy Grail's magical energy being used, but the magical energy of that servant was absurd. It exceeded that of the dragon they arrived with, and while it was no Fafnir, it was still a dragon. They have absurd levels of magical energy to begin with, so, he shrugged, I can't see any other explanation. Then you are looking down on the strength of warriors. Lancer spoke swiftly and surprisingly sternly. Romani's jaw snapped shut as the woman spoke. There are many who achieved great feats in life, and certainly the ability to reign supreme over the likes of dragons should not be surprising. While it may sound terrifying to you, there is no reason to suspect that this servant was not simply using their natural strength. Marie frowned but nodded her head. Not all servants have equal strength, and I have no doubt there are many servants that I would stand no chance against, and even those you, she gestured to Torin, would find it difficult to battle. This could be one such. A big name then. Cu sighed, running a hand through his long hair. Just great, still though. He paused and frowned, something about them seemed awfully familiar. He quickly raised his hand. No, I most certainly didn't meet them in life, but it's just something nagging at me. From what we observed, their manner of fighting appeared similar to the saber in Fuyuki, using their vast levels of magical energy to almost propel it from their body like a weapon. Romani replied with a shrug. That was the closest we could compare it to, but this is much stronger than that. Probably because of that spear. Cu frowned, something wrong with that, and you can tell at a glance. He paused again. Something wrong with that servant and all, but I'm not a fountain of wisdom, so I can't do much more than tell you what I'm seeing with my eyes. He gestured to them with his fingers, and what I can see is that servant is trouble. They left all the same though. Marie pointed out, her face set in clear confusion as she reached up and rubbed the back of her neck before giving a faint sigh. Sorry, I don't understand tactics all that well, so maybe I'm missing something. I think we're all missing something here, unless the servant was just here to test our strength and then leave. Cu remarked, suddenly gaining a hint of understanding. It's the only thing that comes to mind. They arrive with a single dragon and a small force of wyverns. We kill the dragon and leave them all by themselves, which at the very least prove we aren't complete pushovers. Torin gave a long hum, moving his hands to rest on his hips as he continued to think on the situation before he exhaled. Further talk of this will gain us no further insight. We could speculate until the sun rises, but we will gain no ground in this line of inquiry. He nodded to the others. For the time being, I would suggest rest and recovery. I believe there are some here who would benefit most from that. We'll be monitoring you from here. Romani spoke through the communicator once again. If the servant tries to approach again, we'll see them coming from quite a ways off now that we know what to look for. Same with any dragons that could be approaching your position. Torin nodded once to Romani. Then you have my gratitude for this. I shall still assume watch through the night for peace of mind regardless. He paused, slowly turning his head towards the Lancer in the corner of the room. If you intend to travel with us, I believe it might do us some courtesy to have a name by which to refer to you as. The Lancer remained silent, looking around the room. Yet I do not know any of your names. True. The druid admitted with a nod of the head. I am Torin, current leader of the Norsemen here. Caster class servant, and whether you sense it or not, While I carry the strength of one of the light born within me, I am no lordkin. Guess we're doing this then. Cu grunted, then looked towards Olga and raised an eyebrow. The woman caught him staring and looked back with no small amount of confusion, which prompted a roll of the eyes. We're master and servant now, lass. You want me to reveal my true name? All right. Olga mumbled in response, nodding her head once and looking towards the Lancer. Are you going to reveal your true name? If all others do, then I would be more inclined. The Lancer replied with a nod of the head, but I would insist on referring to me by class if we are to engage hostile servants. Olga grunted before nodding her head to the Celt. Hey, in that case. Cu looked towards the woman and cracked a smirk. Cu Chillane. He sighed. Yeah, I'm a caster, not a Lancer. Laugh it up. A warrior can fight in many ways. The Lancer responded with a tilt of the head. I understand the power of primordial runes when used in the hands of a true master. Not quite a true master, but I can at least kill things with them. Cu shrugged his shoulders, also keep a couple folks alive. Though with you knowing some primordial runes? I've got a good guess for who you are, but why spoil the surprise? Lancer thinned her lips at him before turning to the other two servants in the room. I am Nero Claudius of Rome. The blonde proclaimed with a wide grin, puffing out her chest and placing her hands on her hips. Though my being royalty should come as no surprise given my beauty, should it? The Lancer blinked once. Nero Claudius? She pointedly looked the Emperor's feminine body up and down before gazing questioningly to the others in the room. Trust me, this is the tip of the iceberg. Romani remarked with a strained tone of voice. It gets an awful lot stranger the further down you go. You know Francis Drake was a woman as well? What the fuck? That earned a look from Cu of total bafflement. How in the... Romani shrugged, giving him a, I don't know either, sort of expression. Ah, then it's my turn, Marie excitedly called out, clapping her hands together and turning to face the Lancer before she performed a perfect curtsy. I am Marie Antoinette, Queen of France. She raised herself back up and presented the servant with a beaming smile. But you can just call me Marie if you want, I'd actually prefer it if you did. The Lancer gave the woman a blank expression for a few moments before it shifted into a mildly apprehensive look. The Black Knight who's missing half his torso is Tarkus. Cu explained, jerking a thumb over his shoulder and speaking in a somewhat blunt manner. He'll probably be back up in a couple of hours. Nice enough bloke. He'll probably spend most of the time calling you, miss, though. Real polite sort. I see. The Lancer now looked far more concerned than they had done previously, then pointed her hand towards the entrance. And the golem outside? The what? Cu furrowed his brows before he looked over his shoulder at the shadow of the berserker. Then closed his eyes and sighed. Now that makes sense. He turned towards the director, raising a lone eyebrow. How does that even happen anyway? Still though, explains what that mess earlier was. Olga flinched ever so slightly and looked down in a huff, crossing her arms over her chest and glaring at the lamp. What, you have something to say? Not right now. Cu conceded, maybe when you're less liable to have him tear me in half. He looked back towards Lancer. As for the berserker, don't think he has a name, does he? Stall. Peeved. Cu snorted, and who says you don't have a sense of humor? Shaking his head, he turned back to the Lancer. Well? I suppose I should introduce myself to you all. The white-haired woman admitted before closing her eyes. My name is Brynhilder. Lancer class servant. Her eyes opened back up and she regarded the group with an almost cold gaze that contained a hint of desperation to it. For your own sake, please do not show kindness towards me. Brynhilder. Romani gaped openly through the monitor. The Valkyrie? As in the actual Valkyrie? Brynhilder nodded her head once. Wow, that would explain why your servant readings are pretty high. Being summoned in Denmark of all places where yours and Sigurd's legend would be famous would give you a pretty high reputation bonus. He exclaimed, smiling widely before understanding came to him. The means when you said you were searching for someone fighting dragons, you meant. Yes, I was searching for my beloved Sigurd. Brynhilder admitted with a sad smile. Because I love him, I must kill him. Romani blinked once. What? Do not try to understand it. Brynhilder replied, looking away from the man. It is simply something that must be. If Sigurd should appear before me I must love him and then kill him. But that doesn't, Romani trailed off, staring at Brynhilder in clear confusion. Now I'm confused. You might think of it as a curse. Brynhilder explained, the more I love, the more I must kill them. Therefore when I meet Sigurd, I must kill him because I love him. Ooh. Romani grimaced, well that's, he reached up, scratching the side of his neck. If Sigurd was summoned here we do sort of need him, because of the dragons. I am not ignorant of your plight. Brynhildr responded, though not unkindly, however, there is little I can do about this. If Sigurd has been summoned here, then I must kill him. I am sorry for the trouble I will undoubtedly cause. She looked around, which is why I ask that you not show me kindness during our voyage, and if you wish to part ways with me, I would understand. No, all heads turned towards the voice in question with no small amount of surprise. Olga looked up towards the lancer, rising to her feet and staring at her with furrowed brows and a tight frown. You're going to be a problem if Sigurd has been summoned, and only if he has been summoned. Until then, letting you wander away would be stupid. Her jaw rolled. You're going to travel with us and I'm going to work you to the bone if you are. She looked around the room to see the reaction of the other servants. If Sigurd has been summoned and we need his help more than your own and you can't control yourself. She trailed off, although Brynhildr nodded her head once. I understand. The plight of the Norse matters far more than my curse with Sigurd. She responded in an understanding tone. It makes sense for me to be sacrificed in exchange for Sigurd, though I ask if he has been summoned, that I at least have one final chance to meet with him before I die. Fine. Olga nodded once. If he has been summoned, if he hasn't, then this entire conversation is a moot point and irrelevant. Placing her hands on her hips, she closed her eyes and exhaled. Now everyone, get out and go do whatever you want until we need to leave. The group remained silent before they slowly filed out of the tents, not before Olga called out to Torin, wait. The caster paused, then turned around to face the woman with a raised eyebrow. Move the injured into this tent. She spoke in a quiet tone of voice. It's much better than the ones they're currently resting in. Then pointed to her own coat. My mystic coat will keep me warm, and if they stay where they are we'll lose more, won't we? Torin stared at her in silence for a few moments before he nodded his head. There is a chance. Then glanced around the interior. And this would provide superior cover for them, but is that truly something you are comfortable with, to lose your own security for strangers? I said I was going to help you get them south. Olga snapped back with a trace amount of heat before it vanished. It only makes sense that I do everything I can to give them the best chances for their survival. The druid slowly nodded his head. It does. His arms fell to his side as he regarded the woman silently. Do you blame me for their deaths? That got her to pause, slowly looking up at the caster with a perfectly blank expression. The plan to leave was mine. I was the one in command and you spoke out heavily against doing so. We have lost a great many to the attack in the storm. Do you hold me accountable for this? I was the master and you were a servant. Olga responded back after a few moments, placing her hands on her lips and lowering her head so her bangs were covering her eyes. I should have been more forceful, but if we stayed then we probably would have been in a worse position than we are in right now. Most likely. Torin admitted without a moment's hesitation. Between our two plans, yours was the worst option. He remained silent for a moment. But that does not answer my question. Do you blame me for their deaths? I had a dragon-slaying servant and it took too long to kill the dragon. She responded quietly, looking up at him. Is it my fault? Maybe. Torin shrugged. Maybe it was mine for being too naive in assuming we would not be discovered. My hope in avoiding battle altogether might have been misplaced. But without that hope, I doubt I would have the courage to brave the storm. The druid ran a meaty hand through his hair. I blame myself for their deaths. I am their leader, even if only temporary, and it was my role to protect them. I have failed the deceased and now must work to save the living, but that does not wash away my failure. I said I was going to help move them, so it. Olga trailed off and looked away. Never mind. She huffed, walking past the man and out into the cold. It doesn't matter. Torin wouldn't quite agree with that statement. He felt it mattered a great deal, especially since it was clear that in spite of her words she blamed herself. Even if he was the leader, she still thought of herself as his better, which meant that she also thought she carried the responsibility for his own failings. I wonder, Torin quietly whispered to himself as he stared at her retreating shadow moving across the camp. Did you think I blamed you for your servant's failings? He wasn't expecting an answer, so when silence greeted him he was left with little in the way of surprise. HMPH. He grunted once before shaking his head. What a troublesome young woman you are, Olga Marie. He gave the interior of the tent one final look over, measuring out the space within it and determining that they probably would be able to cram the wounded inside. It was spacious enough to allow that much. Is all of modern humanity like this? He asked aloud, reaching out and running his hand across the fabric of the tent before he paused and retracted his hand, grimacing ever so slightly before staring down at the fingers he had felt the surface with and rubbing them against one another. Not to my preference. He much preferred the more natural tents of the Norsemen with their fur cloaks and woolen beds. Still, there was little else he could do about that right now. Personal preference came secondary to the lives of the people. Turning around, he vacated the tent and marched his way over to the wounded. It wouldn't take too long in moving them over so he could make a start on it now. Cu jogged through the camp, chasing after the specific individual before raising his hand and calling out to them, "Oi, wait up." Brynhildr stopped walking, then turned around to face the caster. "Do you require something of me, child of light?" A conversation would be a start. The caster grunted with a half-smile before the smile on his face dissipated in favor of assuming a more puzzled expression, his arms crossing over his chest and leaning back ever so slightly. "You do know if Sigurd is here you all but signed your death sentence, right?" Brynhildr nodded. "That is indeed quite true," she admitted without sounding put off by the topic in the least. "If my beloved is here, I will try to kill him, and if I should succeed, then there is a good chance that I will likely doom your chances of success in this singularity as you call them." She turned her eyes upwards, "In which case, it would make the most logical sense to end me before I could jeopardize your chances." Cu raised an eyebrow and frowned. "Sure, but are you really happy with that?" He pointedly asked, "Not saying what you're talking about doesn't make sense, but are you really gonna be fine with seeing the big guy again only to die a couple seconds later?" "I wish for one final chance to speak with Sigurd. If I can get that, then I would be more than content with my situation." She paused for a moment before a soft smile came upon her features. "No, I would be elated beyond words if I could speak with Sigurd once more." Elated and perhaps overwhelmed. The druid shrugged his shoulders and scratched his head. "Meh. Might just be me with the whole allying with someone just to kill them later. Though I guess when it comes to normal Grail wars that's probably something that would be a given. My role was always to bring warriors to Valhalla." Brynhildr lowered her head and stared at the caster. "Sigurd was obviously different, but even as it stands, I cannot help but judge warriors when I meet them. That is why I am sure the girl will not follow through with her request." "Say what? The master you are all allied to," Brynhildr explained. "If she truly meant her words, then she would have encouraged a contract with me and then used a command spell to order my suicide if it appeared as though I was going to threaten Sigurd. If he is here," she added on, "though I am certain he is, I can feel it deep within me that he walks these lands, no doubt helping where he can." Cu stared at her with a raised eyebrow for a few moments before he chuckled to himself. "Yeah. I can see a lot of other assholes doing that sort of thing, but the girl? I don't see her telling someone to kill themselves." His expression shifted to be more somber. "Damn, she ain't even all that convincing as well. I would like to ask a favor of you, child of light." Brynhildr looked towards the caster. The man made an ugly expression as he could already tell what she was going to ask. "If I meet Sigurd and I cannot control myself, could you stop me?" The caster stared at her in silence for a few moments before he exhaled and rubbed his forearm over his head. "Fuck sake," he grumbled to himself as he lowered the limb. "I can certainly slow you down, but killing you in front of Sigurd is only going to end up with him splitting me in half or something like that." Brynhildr blinked. "It is not for that. I merely do not wish for Sigurd to slay me," she responded with after a few moments, her expression shifting to become more sad. "I try to slay him out of a curse unto myself, but Sigurd, he has no such curse, though perhaps he would wish to slay me for the role I played in the deaths of him and his family." Cu reached up and scratched his chin. I struggle to deal with this sort of thing given, you know," he gestured to himself before lowering his hand. "I mean, Sigurd is probably better than you. No offense, and I'm more worried about the collateral damage if you two were to start fighting." He shrugged. "Still, he probably loves you." The Lancer thinned her lips. "I do not share such confidence in that sentiment." "Yeah, well, we're gonna be guessing about that sort of thing until we actually meet him, if he's even here at all." Cu grumbled before he paused and raised his finger. "On another note, there is something you could do for me as a slight favor, or rather, a favor to everyone." Brynhildr raised an eyebrow at him and tilted her head. "The lass's little metal pal. Way I see it, it does exactly what she says, so if she's got no idea what's happening then neither has it," he explained, prompting a nod of understanding from the Lancer. "The servant with no will of its own. Perhaps more like a weapon and the master its wielder. Not dissimilar to the state of other servants but indeed more pronounced. Yeah, that. Cu nodded at her. Come the morning, I figured I could give her a little training session. Think another version of me did something similar when you last met them but with someone else at the time. Can't tell the specifics but it's just one of those things. He shrugged his shoulders. I can only do so much with a staff and some flashy lights, mind you. So you wish for me to use my spear? Brynhildr nodded her head in understanding. Why? You're faster than the other big dude, so between those two, it's just going to turn into a slugging match and the winner of that would be fairly obvious after a while. Cu explained easily, and probably better than the little blonde emperor and the queen. Tall, armored and friendly isn't going to be swinging that sword for a couple hours and that leaves you. I see. Brynhildr replied, her expression blank for a few moments as she narrowed her eyes at the caster ever so slightly. You say we have not met before and yet I feel this strange connection with you, as though we have. No, it is nothing. She muttered, dismissing whatever else she was going to say. Very well, it would improve our chances if I aid you in this endeavor. Do not thank me for it, please. Olga retreated into one of the smaller tents, big enough for perhaps 2 people. It had belonged to one of those taken away in the initial attack, and given that they weren't going to be needing it anymore, it had remained attached to the horses in the event that someone else needed it. Given that she had given up the tent Chaldea provided them with, she imagined this was one such situation where it was needed. There was a marked difference between the two of them though. While her own tent had been exceedingly more thorough in its design to retain warmth, with tent was a thin piece of fabric draped over a central pole planted in the ground and extended along either side with pegs. The end result being a cone-shaped design to it. She stared down at the fur bedding that lay on the ground and crouched down, extending her hand and resting it atop the exterior and running gloved fingers across it. She couldn't feel it through them, but she could at least tell it wasn't going to be too uncomfortable to sleep on. Turning herself around, she sat down on the fur bed and stared back out the thin slit serving as an entrance and back across the expanse of the camp. The tents were bunched closer together and she could just about make out the muffled voices and the shadows moving through the night, no doubt the wounded being dragged from the original resting places to the larger tent. Straining her ears further, she could make out the irritable noises of the horses as they waited outside in the cold. Olga wasn't much of an animal person at the best of times, but she found herself slightly dubious as to whether or not they would be capable of dragging anyone anywhere if they didn't have some sort of cover for the night. Closing her eyes, she turned away and drew her legs into herself, wrapping her hands around them and remaining silent. Thudding sounds alerted her to stall, moving close to her tent before the boot steps fell silent, the berserker assuming a guard position just outside and likely not willing to move from their spot until she commanded otherwise. A hollow snort ran from her mouth at the thought. Oh, that's why I summoned you. She realized to herself as she let her head fall forwards, resting it atop her knees. Because you don't do anything unless I tell you, right? Stall remained silent. Even when I try, it just doesn't work, does it? She quietly whispered to herself before she lashed out with her right hand and smacked some of the snow near her. The impact produced a muffled thud and sent a small upsurge of snow flying across the tent and bouncing against the side of it. Her teeth grit themselves together before she lowered her arm and let it fall into the snow, gradually raising her head and staring at the outline of the berserker beyond the tent. She couldn't even blame anyone else. It was a golem, she knew that much, she was told that much, and despite that, it hadn't really occurred to her before today. Sure enough, when they had been in previous situations she had just said, attack, and the servant had done just that, but they had support before that time. There wasn't support in the same way, and dragons were many things, stupid wasn't one of them. They didn't fight in the simple way of other berserkers of just swinging at one another like mindless weapons. They had instincts of their own and a great deal of power to back up that animalistic sense of theirs. She had no one else to blame, it was her servant, it did what she said. And everyone knew that, which meant its clumsy performance earlier was her fault, and everyone knew that as well. She looked away swiftly, all but slamming her forehead back into her knees and gradually releasing a quiet groan. Everyone knew it was her fault, and she wouldn't be surprised if they were secretly making comments about it either. Even when she had a servant, nothing went her way, and it was her own fault for that. Her teeth grinded against one another, producing a low sound which was barely audible to her. She paused, hearing the gentle sound of snow crunching under light footsteps gradually growing louder and louder, soon followed by a creaking sound of metal as Stall shifted their attention onto whomever was approaching. She didn't look towards the noise, not willing to muster up the energy to do so. Then came the ruffling of fabric as the director felt someone enter the tent alongside her and sit themselves on the ground. "Dear me," Marie Antoinette's voice rang out, holding a slight hint of discomfort to it. "I had thought the snow wouldn't be quite this bad, but I suppose that's to be expected." The girl sighed lightly, shuffling to try and make herself more comfortable. "I suppose you can at least say there isn't much of a breeze in here, and that looks rather warm." The writer reached out, leaning forwards and running a hand over the top of the fur bedding and nodding her head. "I thought as much. A little rougher than I thought it would be, but it hasn't been treated in the same way, has it?" Olga didn't reply, content to remain with her head buried in her knees. Marie silently pulled her hand back and went back to kneeling in the snow, an animal cloak draped over her body and giving her the appearance of a furry mountain with a head jutting from the top, made marginally more amusing by the oversized bonnet she wore atop her head as well. "Well, good night," Marie spoke, then leaned towards the snow and rested herself atop it, snuggling into her cloak. Olga furrowed her brows and raised her head up, staring at the servant in slight confusion. "What?" Marie already had her eyes closed and looked as though she was trying to get to sleep. "Don't try and..." Olga sighed. "What are you doing? What is this?" Marie kept her eyes closed. "If I'm being honest, I'm not used to sleeping by myself," the queen replied as though the answer was obvious, "and I've heard that sleeping near people is very good for keeping body heat, and that seems rather important in this situation." A single eyelid opened and the sapphire blue orb stared at the director with a hint of amusement. "And as a servant, I should see to my master's needs, shouldn't I?" Olga looked away. "I'm not even your real master." "No," Marie admitted, closing the eyelid once again. "You aren't, but you are my link, and for this singularity, I will treat you as though you are my master." I said as much, and it wouldn't do for a queen to go back on her word. The director didn't make a noise, still staring outside into the snow. "Are you going to try and stay up?" Marie asked as she shifted, opening both eyes now and staring at the director with a slightly chiding expression. "You shouldn't do that, you'll end up ruining your features if you don't get as much sleep as you can." "I know that," Olga quietly grumbled. Did you come here just to sleep?" she asked after a few moments. "You could have done that anywhere else." "Well, I did say why. I have a mystic code that will keep me warm, and there are plenty of others you can sleep alongside." She paused for a moment before scoffing. "I'm sure that Nero would welcome the company." "She would, and you are right," Marie admitted, nodding her head and sitting herself back up. "But I decided that it would be best to sleep here for tonight. I figured that leaving you alone wasn't going to be a good thing. So it's pity." Olga all but spat out the word in disgust, turning her eyes back towards Marie and frowning. "I don't need it, and I don't need comfort. I know what happened, and I don't need to be treated like a child." Marie remained silent as she stared at the director. "I didn't say I was doing it out of pity or comfort. I just said I didn't want to leave you alone. I think that's true of anyone after a rather nasty ordeal." She looked down. "It's just as much for my own comfort as well, to be honest. I suppose in that respect I might be using you just a little bit." That got the director to pause, furrowing her brows ever so slightly. "What?" "Well, is it any real surprise?" Marie chuckled ever so slightly, although there wasn't a hint of warmth in the noise. "I'm not a combat servant. Not really, I can fight, but I'm no knight. Not like Diane." She looked up at the director and gave her a blank look. "All I was ever really good for was looking pretty and trying to make people feel better, but..." She trailed off and gave the director an odd look. "We all know how that ended up." Olga thinned her lips. She hummed rather than give an actual response. "I was quite useless out there," Marie responded, giving a faint sigh. "And I was quite useless in France too. I spent most of my time being supported by everyone else, and it was my own country." She shook her head. "Queen of France, and I had to rely on servants from different eras and completely different worlds in order to save it." She paused for a moment. "I got the chance to see Seine." She cut herself off. "To see Jean shine." She corrected herself, and watching her fight even when she was weakened it was outstanding. "She really is beautiful." The director raised a lone eyebrow at her. "And Marie shrugged. "I carted everyone around in some glass horses and brought peace to the man who killed me. I don't mean to offend Sanson, but he wasn't a warrior, and we both knew it. Neither of us were, and I..." Her eyes closed. "When I tried to fight the other servants, I think I realized it. I realized it when Mozart gave up his life to save me." Olga paused for a moment. That hadn't been mentioned in the report. All she knew was that in the battle against the berserker they had lost Mozart. Of course there was no real reason to make note of it. That was the nature of servants in the most clinical sense of the word, disposable familiars you could use. Even if one died, the Chaldean summoning system meant you could just get another servant in to replace them, so it didn't really count as a true loss to begin with. In the clinical sense of the word, at least. I figured that joining you in this singularity would be a way to make up for France. Marie opened her eyes again, showing a dull hue to her normally bright orbs. To really show that I could make a difference, I suppose you could say that Jean inspired me and I really wanted to prove to myself I could do it. Oh, Marie hummed and looked back into the storm. Well, I proved that I couldn't do much more than gain a dragon's attention for a few seconds. Everything I tried to do just didn't work out all that much. I'm left wondering if my being here even made much of a difference in combat. You're a support servant, Olga quietly muttered before closing her eyes and shaking her head, raising her voice ever so slightly. You were there to keep the wounded in pace with the main body of the caravan with your carriage that required no rest. You shouldn't have been put into a position where you had to fight at all. Yet I was. Marie spoke bluntly. Through no one's fault I found myself on the front line, desperately trying to protect people, and I realized that I'm just not very good at this sort of thing. She smiled. I'm still going to try though. Olga did a double take. What? After that whole spiel about being useless you're still going to? Well, of course I am. Marie giggled as though the director had said something amusing. I'm a servant summoned to do the will of my master, and even if you're my temporary one, you determined yourself, all of us, to protect that carriage, and I made a promise to myself as a queen, and like I said, it wouldn't do for me to go back on my word. Closing her eyes once again, Marie slowly lowered herself back to the ground and hugged her body close under her fur cloak. I might not be a very good combat servant, but I'm still a servant. If I were to lose heart after something like that, then I wouldn't be much good, would I? Olga stared at the servant in silence before she similarly closed her eyes and slowly lowered herself onto her bedding and turned her body so she wasn't facing the rider. By the way, Marie whispered from behind her, what you said about Lancer earlier. You aren't going to do that, are you? Olga bit her lower lip. How do you know? Because you don't seem the type to throw people away like that. Marie chuckled ever so slightly. I suppose I have a sense for this sort of thing, not if you can really help it. I was going to drum your master out of the program without even speaking to him. Olga bluntly responded as she kept her eyes closed. Without even a chance to explain himself to me, I was going to toss him back out the way he came. Why? He fell asleep in the middle of my briefing. Olga recalled her initial annoyance and found that she was still rather irritated by that, just snoring when I was trying to explain everything to the other candidates. She all but growled. Despite that, Marie found herself chuckling, prompting Olga to pause for a moment. Is that funny? No, it's just the thought of you seeing someone just snoring away. The woman responded before she continued on. And what would you have done when he left? Quote. He'd already signed the NDA and hadn't been made aware of anything that was important enough. We'd have just dropped him back off where we found him in the first place. She replied, giving a slight shrug. So maybe I am the type to just toss people away. Marie merely hummed to herself. Well, you might be. I'm not good at reading the mood sometimes. I think Mozart calls me a bit of an airhead at the worst moments. There was another silence. Even so, would you really kill an ally when they were struggling with something difficult? Quote. Well, I suppose we might find out soon. Marie mumbled quietly, a gentle yawn emerging from her throat. Or maybe we won't. I'll just have to wait and see, won't I? Olga remained silent as she stared at the side of the tent. Firing someone without meeting them was one thing. Killing someone after working with them for so long was something else. It might make sense if they had betrayed you, as was the case with La. As was the case in the past, Brynhildr had all but admitted what her intentions were, and it was a curse on her very being. A troublesome curse that might not even come into play if Sigurd hadn't been summoned. Who knew how many days they would be traveling with the Lancer? Fujimaru wouldn't do it. She could tell as much. He was stupid and naive like that. But could she do it? Olga shuffled, electing to ignore it for the time being. She could put that much off her mind. Thinking about killing potential allies mere hours after meeting them for what-ifs wasn't the sort of thing she was willing to dwell upon. Furthermore, it didn't make sense from a tactical standpoint. If you have a resource, you don't just toss it when it becomes a little difficult. Her eyes squeezed shut and she released a breath. Sleep would be more than a little welcome right now. And
Little moment between Olga and Marie because it's nice.
Also yes. The Lancer is Brynhildr, which brings its own problems, as was discussed in the actual chapter in regards to killing the guy who can actually slay dragons. Even Brynhildr knows it's a bad thing, so, there's that.
Whether Sigurd is actually here, who knows? Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories.
Chapter 125. Those who sit at the edge of eternity.
Everything is wrong. This existence is wrong. I can't comprehend it.
I can't understand it. It's too much and it's too little. Everything is too bright and too dark, it's too cold and it's too hot. It's wrong. It's right. I hate it. I love it, this existence.
This sense of living. What is it? What does it mean? What am I? Am I alive? What is living? What are we? Why are we all the same? The same. What does it mean to be the same? What does it mean to be different? Why does this disparity exist? Why do I exist? What am I supposed to do? What are we supposed to do? Where do we go from this point? Where will we go from this point? And what did we do to deserve this? Flames burn at our bodies, illness seeps into our skin, time tears at our flesh. This is pain. It's ugly. It's hideous. It's invigorating.
It's overwhelming. I want to go back. I don't want to go back. Why do we exist? Why do we die? What am I? What is a calamity? What is a miracle? What am I? It was in the middle of the night when they returned, riding alone atop Yamre as they approached the great tree that stretched into the sky. The Lancer could feel the connection with their master from up ahead, although it was closer than they were expecting. Either he was waiting for her or he was busying himself with something else at the time and their arrival coincided with whatever it was. The horse slowed to a halt as the rider caught sight of their master standing outside in the storm. The riders stared at them from a distance, the outline of their master staring up into the sky without making a single noise or an effort to seek cover. Already snow was layering itself atop their person, indicating that they had been standing outside for a considerable length of time already. Their master released a hum, shifting, displacing the snow from atop their body. Lumps fell to the ground as the head turned in their direction. The reptilian head stared at her from a distance. "Ah, you're back."
"I am," the knight replied from atop their mount, staring at the servant. "You have been standing there for some time." "I have, yes." The servant responded with a nod. A black scaled hand raised itself in front of the head as the owner of the limb gazed at their clawed appendage. "I never understood temperature. I was curious what the cold felt like." The hand clenched itself and was lowered. "Is it always like this?" "That is why it is called the cold." The rider responded with an indifferent tone of voice. "I doubt there is much you can learn from it aside from its effect on living things." "I am aware of such things now, but it is." The servant trailed off, giving a long and troubled hum as their head shifted to the side and directed their gaze towards the snow. "Until now, I had not experienced this sensation and I am left to wonder." Lancer remained silent as they stared at their master, not feeling the need to comment upon what appeared to be a realization. Is it the black mark that touches my being granting me this clarity, or was it always there and I failed to realize it? Is this relevant to the situation at hand? You've returned without the siblings I sent with you. The servant spoke in a calm voice, turning their head back to the Lancer. Which means they're dead. "And I returned, as per your commands." For the first time during the conversation a hint of emotion seeped into the servant's voice, the otherwise cold feminine voice turning slightly frustrated. "I could have eliminated them all without issue." The dark-scaled servant stared at her in silence before the draconic head tilted ever so slightly in evident confusion. "Why would I want that? They were able to slay a brother of mine and are now our equals. They are welcome to remain in this country without issue." Lancer exhaled. "So you are still yet to understand." "Understand?" The servant parroted in confusion. "What is there to misunderstand? They have earned their place in this world and proven themselves equals. So I have no further reason to battle them." Lancer gave a dismissive grunt. "You claim to view me as an equal." "We are fellow dragons touched by darkness." The servant responded casually, gesturing between the two of them. "What else could we be?" "I shall take advantage of your ignorance of our situation as servant and summoner to offer you counsel," Lancer replied as they snapped the reins on Yamre and approached the taller servant. "You should kill them now while they are weak." The servant virtually did a double take at her. "What? Why would I do such a thing?" Their voice was virtually drowned in innocent confusion. "And weak?
they have already proven to be equal strength? Your understanding of strength is flawed, however that is not the topic of this conversation. Lancer interrupted. The servant snapped their jaw shut as the mount came to a halt. Even atop their horse, Lancer was still the shorter of the two, with their master easily towering over the mounted knight. Even supposing they are equals, they will regard you as an enemy to defeat. Lancer explained curtly, not giving the master the opportunity to add in another argument. However, they needn't have bothered as the fellow servant seemed somewhat transfixed on what they were saying. That is their entire reason for gathering. No servant summoned will aid you, hence the presence of the dragon slayer to the south in this new group. The servant remained silent, staring at Lancer for a few brief moments before speaking again. Is that so? They muttered in a low voice, slowly shifting their attention elsewhere and staring at nothing. I do not understand. Perhaps if I were to explain their newfound position to them, they would reject your ideals swiftly. Lancer countered once again. It is survival of the fittest in all but name. Purging away the weak and proclaiming those who remain to be equal and therefore worthy of existence. Then what do you suggest? Lancer shifted themselves. For the time being, we have lost track of the servants, and finding them again would mean scouring the entire southern region. Considering the additional pockets of resistance that have yet to be discovered, this is a waste of resources, as this group will no doubt re-emerge in the future. And then it would be a trivial matter to crush them all in one fell stroke. Lancer explained, turning their mount to move past the servant stood in the snow. Whether you believe it or not does not factor into this. The moment you fell upon them with dragons and began burning their people, you became an enemy to all who reside in this land. There is no outcome that will not involve more death, even of those you proclaim your equal. Why go through such a struggle against me when there is no further need for it? The servant turned towards them. I am creating a world free of disparity? And therein lies your problem. Despite holding the essence of a human, you do not understand a single thing about them. The Lancer coldly replied before they paused, shifting their attention elsewhere. You do not understand the hearts of men. They turned back to their master. And the servant who throws crystal knives has already made their answer known to you. The taller servant remained silent in the face of the argument. Even if they had never met face to face, the answer of the knife thrower was clear as day. They would continue to slay dragons as they appeared, regardless of where it was. They moved from location to location, and he had not once been able to deduce where they would appear next. Just as swiftly as they would appear and cut down droves of his kindred, the servant would vanish just as swiftly as though they had not been there at all. The feelings it elicited from him were odd. He had no name for them and had never truly experienced emotions all that well to begin with, even as a dragon before his infection by the dark sludge. When you set out for this quest, what is it you truly sought? Lancer pressured. If it was a world without disparity, then you have failed from the onset. Human and dragon shall never be equal. We are both unique amongst our respective races. I do not believe so, the servant replied, their voice turning hard for the first time since the conversation began, shifting their attention onto the Lancer. And our sister is proof enough of that. The end result of a cult that does not exist here. Lancer rebuked swiftly. And one that shall not find roots here either. This land is entrenched in their own gods, and they will not so readily obey them to pursue the path of becoming a dragon. The servant paused for a moment. And you assume such a thing is not possible to begin with. I have seen men become dragons before, and they did not do so to become equal. They did so for power, to bring the disparity you seek to end. Lancer looked away, then snapped the reins of their mount once again. If you still doubt my words, then seek the advice of your kin. She knows the truth that you do not see. Is that so? The servant muttered as the Black Knight trotted past them and towards the base of the archtree. The black-scaled giant remained where he was for a few moments in silence before their reptilian face scrunched up ever so slightly and they turned away, marching in the direction of the entrance. Hazel eyes slowly opened as a familiar presence approached, the head inclined ever so slightly and flickered towards the entrance. The silhouette of the visitor merged into the dark clouds that hung outside. Despite that, one couldn't hide the faint glowing around the forehead in the shape of a diamond. I was expecting you. The seated figure called out. Despite her diminutive size compared with the new arrival, it did not change the fact that even seated she all but demanded a certain degree of respect. Unsurprising given her additional features, a pair of curved horns jutting from the side of her head from just beneath her brown hair and a curled tail protruding from the base of her person.
The face of the woman shifted into one of understanding. I see, so she could no longer contain her words.
The larger figure remained silent for a few seconds before they responded. You knew how she felt then. They muttered before looking down. I was caught off guard by her sudden intensity that I was unable to respond for a few moments. Another silence followed before he eventually looked up. Did you know that was how they felt?
Naturally. I see. Closing their eyes, the figure gave a short sigh before they opened again and they advanced further into the cave. Tell me, sister, where did I go wrong?
Did you believe you went wrong somewhere? That I can feel doubt in my own intentions if proof enough? They admitted, clawed hands clenched into fists by their side. Yet it stung most when the words were spoken aloud by another. A land free of disparity is indeed what I would welcome again, but is such a thing possible? Of course not. The woman chuckled loudly and somewhat amusedly, even as the head snapped towards her and the eyes narrowed on her form. Such a thing is impossible now. The laughter died down. But it is not something I can merely tell you, you would have had to have seen it with your own eyes. Seen what? Disparity. She replied, you saw as much during your life, didn't you? The living calamity that would burn the world? TCH. The reptilian head clicked their tongue. That was not, I remember the forest, the lands, the people. And, they were small. They were weak. The woman coldly explained, they were smaller than you. Lesser than you. You couldn't stomach that. That wasn't, he paused, looking around for a moment before his armored brows furrowed ever so slightly, was that truly what it was? Did I do all that because I didn't like their weakness?
The woman shrugged, I doubt you could understand what weakness is. I doubt you can still understand it, she admitted after a few moments before rising up to her feet and looking up at the taller figure. How can you? Coming from an age where all was the same, it is no surprise you would not wish to burden your sight with the unfamiliar. The weakness must have been intolerable to your eyes.
The taller figure stilled their body. What? I can see no other reasoning. She continued on, giving a faint shrug of the shoulders as she casually strolled around the taller servant. Surely that must be why. You could not grasp the simple fact of things being different and sought to just get rid of it. That isn't, they paused for a moment, their jaw clenching. That isn't why, that can't. Come now, she threw her arms wide. You're the great bringer of calamity. The lands burn under your mighty breath. That which you find ugly ceases to be. The arms lowered and the expression of the woman turned blank. So what is it that motivated this? Where did these flames of destruction come from? Where did this change come from?
Change. We both know that the ancients did not look like your draconic form. She pointed out, gesturing to his body up and down. Even before you were touched by the dark, your body warped itself, shifting in accordance with your desire. So what was it that was so ingrained in your being that was strong enough to alter your very flesh?
The figure looked away from her sharply. That was not. He paused for a moment before growling. No, my reasoning could not have. I am not mindless destruction. He all but roared. There was reasoning to it. I had to find. The woman inclined her head. What did you have to find? What was it that you sought?
You've held these thoughts for some time. Since I learned of your goal. She admitted without a moment of hesitation, in which case, you could say I held these thoughts from the moment I was summoned. Your dream, this desire in your heart that you proclaim aloud, it will never come to fruition and you are already proof of its failure. She pointed a finger at them. We both can see it, every dragon beyond this tree can see it. Slowly, the being raised their clawed hand and stared at it, gazing at the oily black scales which constituted their skin before slowly clenching their fingers into a fist and allowing a flicker of yellow fire to dance across the limb. I am. You are. The woman responded, though not unkindly and with a hint of sadness. Even should you realize this fantasy of yours, it will never truly come about. Not while you live, and even the dragons outside are not so immune. She pointed out, jerking her head towards the entrance of the tree and out into the storm. You can see it clearly as you can see the sun in the sky, or rather you have yet to see that which lays before your very eyes. The figure remained silent. Why tell me this now? He turned towards her, and why is it impossible? Surely the humans that remain might learn what you taught, the path to be our true equals. To become our equals was not why I crafted that path. She gently cut him off. I built the path that led to eternity for those who could find no peace in the land of disparity. They could banish away their woes to the edge of time and remain content. The wisdom of the dragons is no true wisdom as much as it is to flee from the world itself and walk the path of separation. Separation. I suppose some might call it enlightenment. She admitted with a half-chuckle, some might call it cowardice. For me, it was simply the path that would let the troubled find peace. To rise above the pain of the world and find purpose in something that would last forever, a pillar that would remain even as the world was consumed by the cycles, but it is not a path all should seek. Why not? For the first time in the conversation, the woman refused to answer the question. I cannot provide that answer for you. It is something you must learn for yourself.
You would deny me this answer after the string of arguments you present? Why? Because we are not the same being. She simply replied. I was born long after your time, so I understand the lands of disparity all too well. How can I explain the value of difference to one who cannot even understand difference to begin with? Then what should I do? The figure asked after a moment. Gesturing to the storm outside, Artoria tells me to slaughter my enemies without hesitation because they will not accept me, but I do not know why I should. My very purpose was to bring about a land of equals, but now you claim such a thing is impossible. The hand dropped. Why then should I strive to continue this further if my dream cannot be realized? If the land free of disparity is truly beyond my grasp? Because it is not truly your dream. Brows furrowed, how can you be so certain?
Your body would not have changed if that were true. She pointed out with a wry smile, coming to a stop directly in front of them and looking up. There is a desire inside you, a singular feeling that changed your entire being, and you have yet to realize it. Perhaps the nature of humanity will grant you further clarity, but it is your desire. Not mine.
Then I should slaughter without care? He accused, pointing at the woman sharply, like you claim I did? Whatever your desire was, you could not stomach the sight of others weaker than yourself. As for why this was, I cannot say, but perhaps, she slowly reached out, raising her palm towards the forehead of the reptilian and placing it atop their scales. Perhaps, it explains this.
My eye. What manner of eye brings weakness to those who gaze upon it? To see another and steal away their strength. She lowered her hand back to her side. You would ask me something. A nod of the head. Go to one of the human villages that was burned and remain there until morning. Walk amongst it and stare at all that lies there. Return and tell me what you think of it.
The figure frowned ever so slightly as they stepped back. What? You propose something so? You seek answers. Go and find them. She smiled. We will be here when you return.
The servant stared down at her in silence before turning back around, marching towards the storm before he paused for a moment. Akal, if you thought my dream was folly, why did you stay?
Because I want to see what your real dream is. She replied honestly, and to see what the great Calamate, bane of the Lordkin, wants from existence is a rare privilege indeed. Last of the ancient dragons. Akal tilted her head. Whatever else, you are my family, and there was something about your state of being where I could not help but gaze upon it and say, he's not being truthful to himself.
Calamate looked over his shoulder, arrow-shaped head staring back at her with two large horns resting at the back of his crest-like head that curled upwards while a smaller pair lay beneath them. The central glowing diamond-shaped red eye on their forehead narrowed ever so slightly before it dulled and the eyelid around it closed shut. Small eye at the side of the head closed and the figure turned back around, two large wings emerging from the back of the figure and spreading as wide as they could. With a single beat, Calamate hurled himself into the air and shot off into the distance, soon traveling out of sight and even out of range of the natural sensory abilities of her detection. Akal closed her eyes before slowly craning them down to the entrance and opening them up once again. Hello, Artoria. I suppose you heard some of that? Some. Artoria replied as she stepped forwards, then looked over her shoulder and gazed off towards the distant sky before returning her helmet to face Akal once again. You pressured him into acting then. You set off the spark and his curiosity brought him to me. Akal pointed out, though I doubt you could contain yourself much longer. Artoria didn't dismiss the words. To see a dragon preach of equality was baffling to me. To see it practiced in such a way was vexing. Her words were sharp and toneless, despite that Akal believed them to be true enough. He comes from a different time, long before anything such as kings and queens were even thought of. Akal excused, even then, he cannot comprehend the world as you or I do. Why else would he be summoned in such a class? The class of madness is it? There was a pause before Artoria nodded her head. That rings true in a sense. What he spoke of was madness. From the very beginning, he cannot comprehend he stands atop others purely through existing. Few could ever call themselves his equal in anything.
Akal merely hummed in assent before she directed her gaze upwards. What do you think he will say when he comes back? Why do you assume I am concerned? Artoria countered just as swiftly, so long as he acts as my master, I shall remain his servant. Perhaps he will forego this flawed plan before it leads him to self-made ruin, or perhaps he will remain in ignorance until the very end. Whatever happens, I have provided my counsel on the matter. Akal chuckled at her words. I suppose that much is true. She smiled. Still, perhaps it is more a vested interest in mine. For so long I led humans down the path of enlightenment to become a dragon. I wonder if I can lead a dragon to become a human? Artoria stared at the dragon woman in silence for a few moments before her eyes narrowed behind her helmet. Is that your sole motivation for supporting him? To use him as a mere experiment for yourself? That is an ugly way of phrasing it. Akal softly rebuked before thinning her lips. Yet, I wonder if it is wrong to describe it as such. She wondered before shaking her head. But that is not truly my intent. I did not lie to him. I will support him until the very end of his dream because he is the last of his race and I am the first of mine. She directed her attention back to the Lancer. Are you not curious? Hardly, I have explained as such. Perhaps that is more loss for yourself, to witness the growth of an individual. She shrugged, turning her attention back to the storm. When daybreak comes, I wonder if it will be the dawn of just a new day. Artoria remained silent for a moment before she grunted once and turned around, walking back towards the exit and into the storm. Do as you will. I will offer no opinion on the matter further. Akal called out to her before she left. What will you do should he ask you for advice on leadership? The Lancer paused. And for what reason would a conversation such as that even arise? The draconic woman merely smiled in an almost knowing tone before shrugging her shoulders and returning to where she had initially been seated. Turning back around and placing herself atop the stone surface, crossing her legs and resting her arms on her knees before closing her eyes. I wonder, Akal wryly commented. Your sense of knowing has an eerie sense of familiarity to me. Artoria commented, looking over her shoulder at the woman, as though the story itself has already been written for you and you merely exist to observe the content from beginning to end. Really, is that how it seems? The woman tilted her head, thinning her lips and giving the Lancer a curious expression. And you say you knew another such as this? I detested that habit of his as well. Lancer bluntly commented, swiftly turning on her heel and marching out into the snow, but not before giving another parting comment. Though he had the sense to at least dress. Leaving Akal alone to herself within the base of the great archtree. The brown-haired woman inclined her head back and hummed almost silently, then directed her attention downwards towards the clothes she was actually wearing. Or more accurately, the rags she was clad in. Dark gray strips of fabric loosely wrapped around her body which gave her the more distinctive visual appearance of a mere vagrant. Akal hummed to herself before slowly raising her head upwards and crossing her arms over his chest. Idly reaching towards one of the looser bits of fabric and running her fingers along its surface to give the texture a feel. Naturally, it felt somewhat ratty and rather uncomfortable to her. Withdrawing her hand away, she sighed almost imperceptibly. Even if she was to exist beyond the regular timeframe of creation and stare down at it from the edge of eternity, that was no reason for forego comfort. Akal reached up, running a sharp fingernail up and down her chin in thought before snapping her fingers. I suppose I could always see what the humans who fled had. She realized, well, not like they will be needing it though. An alternative solution was to just go to the pile of corpses the wyverns and dragons had brought back and rootle through all of that to find something to wear. Maybe put a couple of pieces together and see what she ended up with. Humans did that sort of thing rather frequently to her knowledge, or it was undead. With how often the two came about, it was difficult to keep track of which race had which customs. Shrugging her shoulders and dismissing the notions from her mind, she rose up from her seated position and dusted herself off before walking towards the entrance of the archtree and stepping out into the cold. The moment she was instantly blasted in the face by an icy wind and the scraps clung to her body only by the grace of whatever luck she had. Akal decided that it would indeed be best for her to find something more suitable to clothe herself in than simple rags. Though it was better than what she was wearing when she was first summoned. That being nothing at all. Who could have thought being a human was such a challenge? In all her life, the cold had barely affected her at all because of her scales. Now she had to think about all sorts of little things. It was rather exciting. This was rather. Calamate wasn't sure that there was a word for what he was feeling right now. Or if there was, it was yet another thing he was ignorant of.
He paused and stared off into the distance as the unfamiliar word rattled around inside his skull.
Ignorance. Before the flame, there was no such thing as ignorance. There was no such thing as knowledge. Things simply were, and that was that. Without anything new to discover or old to study. Existence was it. The dragon grunted to himself as he trudged forwards, passing through the charcoal marks of what had once been an outer wall and into the town. Or it had been a town, now having much more in common with an old bonfire with the amount of black wood that littered the ground and ash that hung in the air.
What was he supposed to learn here? His dull red eyes swept across his surroundings with puzzlement flashing through the orbs. A call had sent him here with the clear intention of showing him something, but it eluded him. What was he supposed to learn by strolling through this failure? His hands clenched into fists as his tail swept back and forth in irritation.
Being here elicited odd emotions from him. Those who lived here had been scorched swiftly, almost sickeningly easy, it was.
Calamate's jaw clenched as the snow below him started to hiss. The head around his body rose for a brief instant before it fizzled back down to a usual temperature. The servant raised up his right foot as he stared down at the surface of his black scales. Water dripped down and back into the puddle of lukewarm slush that lay at his feet. The dragon stepped out of the puddle and back into the snow before looking up once again.
What was it that bothered him when it came to this? The moment he had begun this campaign of his, he expected there to be casualties. It was a land of disparity. Where there was strength there would also be weakness, but this. It had taken less than 5 minutes to turn this once prosperous town into nothing but a smoldering ruin. The attack had been swift and devastating. The humans here unable to even mount anything that could have been construed to be a defense, and they had been all but massacred. No, they had been massacred, slaughtered, roasted, butchered. It was swift. It was unexpected. They had been going about their lives without even a hint of what was about to happen to them, and then he and his kin had fallen upon them like a storm, a raging inferno that reduced everything to ash.
Calamate paused, slowly shifting his attention to gaze long and hard at his surroundings once again.
Oh, he realized aloud, thinking back on the attack against the humans who knew nothing of what was about to occur. Was that what concerned him? Was that what ate at the back of his mind? That he now took the place of the fire beings and their slaughter of the dragons? His eyes closed and he looked away sharply. No, that couldn't be the sole answer. He very much doubted it was the answer to begin with. The realization had brought clarity to his role, but it was a reversal. Some part of him had understood that those who were native to the world would have no inkling of what was about to befall them. Whether or not his actions were the same as the fire beings held little sway over his arguments. If that was his only counter, then his quest for the end of disparity would have continued on without any further doubts. The end result would have brought a lasting peace. How could it not? Without disparity, all would be equal, and therefore it would be a world without pain. A world that was right once again. There was a pause before a small snort of yellow flame rushed out of Calamate's nose. The black dragon shook his head and turned back around. This changed very little. It didn't explain why both Akal and Artoria seemed to criticize his plan. Perhaps it would never be a world without disparity, but it would be close enough. Once the humans saw that they were regarded as equal to dragons, the two races could live in peace for all time without concern. What could be so wrong with that? As he prepared to take off once again, his black wings spreading wide on his back, he found himself pausing for a moment. His eyes caught sight of a shape not far from him. For whatever reason, he was entranced by the shape and swiftly retracted his wings before turning his entire body to face it, as his gaze never once wandered from this unusual fixation. It appeared to be a structure of sorts. The humans called them buildings. It was only natural. They had no archtree of their own to call shelters, so they created these things to act as substitutes. He had seen them all time and time again. In the forest he turned to ash, in the city where he had contracted the black stain. However, there was something about seeing them which gnawed at his person. Something that had always enraged him when he saw them, but for whatever reason, he could never identify why he was so vexed by these false archtrees. There was no real reason to be angered by the mere sight of them, yet he could never help it. He felt the familiar rage burn within him. His right hand clenched into a fist as yellow fire began to leak out from between his knuckles. The hand spread wide to reveal an orb of bright yellow flames with a center of pure dark bubbling away in his palm. He raised his hand towards the elongated building and prepared to erase it. "You're the great bringer of calamity. The lands burn under your mighty breath, that which you find ugly ceases to be. So what is it that motivated this? Where did these flames of destruction come from? Just as swiftly as the flames had come into being, then soon sputtered away back into nothing. Calamate slowly lowered his arm. Why did he hate this so much? Why did staring at the structures of the flame beings disgust him? Did he simply hate them? Was that all that motivated him all those years? No, he refused to believe that. He could not believe that. Such simple reasoning, to reduce his entire being to one who destroyed everything he saw out of mere hatred was. It was wrong. It was wrong. So then why? Calamate took a single step towards the building, then another, and another. Before long, he was marching towards it with a certain level of determination about his person. He was fixated on finding the answer to his ugly feeling. It was the same ugly feeling that found purchase in the back of his head when he thought of bringing about a world free of disparity. With a shove forwards, the burnt wooden door was reduced to splinters. The fragments rocketed into the building and broke the already shattered wall directly opposite the door further. The black dragon took a single step forwards, then slowly lowered their body to fit in through the doorway and into the main room itself. The building was small, he couldn't even stand up without running the risk of putting his head through the ceiling. At least, that would have been a concern if there was even a ceiling to exist in the first place. The back half of the house had been ripped asunder. Wood and brick were scattered across the flooring. Calamate stared at the damage. His lower jaw wavered ever so slightly as he held back the urge to throw a fist at the walls around him and reduce the skeleton of a house to nothing but sticks and stones. The urge was controlled and reined back into his body before it could take hold of him. Instead, only a puff of dark smoke leaped from between his fangs. The eyes of the dragon swept around the room, lingering on the smaller creations within the shelter. What remained of them were difficult to discern the meaning behind. The ceiling had clearly collapsed inwards before something had torn out the back of the house and taken most of the debris with it and into the open. Or something had crashed into the house at an angle and blasted through the roof and then the back wall. Calamate took a single step forwards, then paused as he felt something snap underneath his clawed foot. His head slowly looked down to the noise, shifting his foot to the side and staring at the melted remains of a sword, snapping in two from him having stepped on it. With a soundless grunt, he jerked his foot to the side and sent the remains of the weapon away from him. He looked back up and towards the remains of the main room. There was little left to tell about this place. It was a ruin. Plain and simple, it would be completely unlivable and unworkable as a shelter from the elements. Calamate marched forwards, kicking away debris by his feet and crunching bricks underfoot. What would this have looked like before it was burned to nothing? Those constructed shelters of humans and the Lightkin were always so large. No, there was a difference between them. Those who lived in the woods had built shelters that were little more than huts such as this, enough to shield them from the worst of the cold but nothing else more. When Calamate thought back to the great towers of the city of humans he had visited, the shelters of stone, it was jarring. Why was there such a difference between the two of them? Was it merely a case of available resources? Yet again, evidence of more disparity, but it begged the question. If those who lived in the forest had the same resources as those who lived in the city, would they have built towering structures to rival the arc trees? Would their shelters have reached for the skies? The hands at his side clenched. That ugly feeling perked back up within him as he thought about it. The desire to burn everything that remained in this hovel flared up like a rising sun but was forced back down. Not yet, not until he had his answers. He was close. He was desperately close to it, he could tell as much. There was something he was missing and it lay within these shelters. They always brought about the hatred that Akal spoke of, that desire to turn everything to mere ash and dust. But there must be a reason for this hatred. He had never felt it before, and as long as it burned within him at the mere thought of humans and shelters, he would never be able to bring about that world free of disparity. Hatred was a product of the flame. He had to know why he felt it. He had to know, and the answer lay somewhere amongst these ruins. It lay within his own body. He had felt the change take hold of him even before he was touched by the blackness in the human city. His body had warped, shifted and creaked until it wasn't recognizable, and yet, there was something else when the change had been completed. Something comfortable. That was the word he searched for. It was comfortable for him in this form, and even more so as he existed now. He had never truly experienced such freedom before, and yet everything still felt wrong. There was a wrongness about the world rather than within himself, or with his body. The state of being that he existed within was wrong. But why did he think that? Was it because of the disparity in existence, or was there something more to it? A growl rumbled from his throat. Ever since he thought of the humans and the light kin constructing their false shelters, He had been burdened by this anger. This unquenchable feeling of fury. That which would turn him into the calamity that even the Lightkin feared. There was something about it that felt to be more than simple hatred. There was something more that burned within him. Why is everything you build offensive to my eyes? He roared aloud, swinging his fist around and slamming it into the remaining wall of the house. The wall all but ceased to exist from the impact. A deep thump echoed out amongst the town, soon followed by explosions as the fragments of brick and wood launched at incredible speeds impacted the surroundings like a buckshot, tearing apart the ground and what remained of the ruins. Why? Calamate roared, if I were to make a shelter such as this, I would not. He paused. If I were to make, he voiced out in a quieter tone of voice, his eyes flickered as confusion flashed through them before something else started to burn just behind them. Realization. Artoria wasn't expecting to find the other dragon human shifting through the corpses of the wyvern's recent meals. It would have turned her nose if she had an inkling of care. That being said, there was something grim about watching the woman's blank expression as she waded elbow-deep in human remains. What are you doing? She eventually called out, tilting her head ever so slightly to the side and frowning behind her helmet. Akal paused and looked up towards the voice, soon finding Artoria stood not far from her. Her expression brightened ever so slightly when she caught sight of the Lancer. I am following your advice from earlier. My advice? Yes. The woman nodded her head, then leaned back and withdrew a bloody arm before gesturing to her body. The wraps are barely clothes at all, so I am changing my attire, and it is simpler to reuse the clothes of the dead humans here than to go through the process of making my own. There was a pause before she raised an eyebrow. I believe it is a human custom to make use of everything one can get their hands on, isn't it? Artoria stared at her in silence for a few moments, then looked to the side to see a wyvern slowly sneaking past her towards the pile with the clear intention of getting something to eat. The beast paid little interest in either of them as it fell upon the nearest corpse and tore into it. Perhaps, in a pragmatic sense. The Lancer admitted slowly, turning her head back towards Akal. However, it is rarely done in such a grisly fashion. There was a pause before she spoke again. I gave you this advice hours ago. Have you been doing nothing but digging through corpses for scraps of cloth since then? Akal nodded her head. I had little else to do. She casually admitted with a wave of her hand before she pointed to the side. I have already acquired some choice pieces of clothing for myself. I believe they will suit me well. Artoria shifted her attention towards the location the woman was pointing at. A small pile of fabric, chainmail and leather bracers was present in a strewn-together fashion. Blood coated much of it, and the fabric itself was ripped apart in several locations. You intend to face your foes wearing the attire of the recently deceased and smelling as though you belong to them. Artoria curled her lip behind her helmet. Her arms slowly raised themselves up and crossed over in front of her chest. I had thought dragons were beings of pride, and yet neither you nor our master exhibit any of the behavior I associate with them. Akal raised an eyebrow. Pride in what? She asked curiously. Excuse me? For what reason would a dragon be proud? What is there to take pride in? She asked. I know of the legends of Fafnir, the greedy dragon who hoarded treasure. What was there to be proud of in that? A collection of trinkets that could never be used. Akal sighed, bringing her arms up and shaking the viscera off them. To be prideful, there must be something that exists to bring about this emotion. Pride in power? All dragons are powerful. For what reason would you take pride in mere chance? Artoria remained silent for a moment before she responded. Are you saying you are without pride? Of course not. Akal scoffed. I have my pride as the head of an entire order. I built a faith that lasted through every era. I rebelled against the god's extinction of the dragons and won. To be a dragon is to be more than born as one. You must think like one as well, to be separated from the world and all that resides within it. To act as a mere observer to all of creation as you remain seated within eternity. HMPH. Does that surprise you? I would not expect a dragon to preach of faith. Artoria grunted. Dark helmet staring down at the kneeling woman from across the pile of bodies. Ignoring the ripping and tearing sounds of the feasting wyverns nearby. I am undecided as to whether such a thing is amusing or puzzling. We all think in different ways. Akal replied knowingly. You have pride in something, I am sure. I have my pride in the legacy that I built, and you have done something you feel pride in, but that is not a purely draconic trait. Pride comes to all living beings if they have the wit to understand themselves. In my experience, dragons are the most prideful beings. Artoria responded with, Perhaps that does come with the excessive power they wield and through the sheer might of being a dragon. Creatures who can turn whole countries to glass and inspire an image of terror that will be forever burned in the hearts of men.
Calamate is one such dragon. Truly. Artoria frowned, not that Akal could see it. His responses to battle thus far have been timid. He makes for a poor warrior and an even poorer leader, his goals are confused and flawed and he has not the sense to see them. In what manner could he be considered anything more than a fool?
Akal frowned. There is being foolish and then there is stupidity, she remarked, rising up to her feet and staring across to Artoria. Calamate might be stupid, but he is no fool. No, he is ignorant. Without ever having the chance to understand, as I have explained before. Once he understands his goal, we shall both see just how far his conviction shall take him when aimed in the right direction. Artoria narrowed her eyes. And what direction would that be? You speak as though you already know what path he shall take. Again, your similarities with a distant figure of my past rear up once again and I am no less troubled by them.
He'll understand what it truly means to be alive. Akal explained, something he was never granted the opportunity to do in the past. Yes, his ideal was flawed but that is through ignorance rather than anything else. Ignorance can be cured. Once he finds his reasoning, I shall support him wholeheartedly.
With the implication that you were not willing to before.
I was helping him, I wasn't supporting him. She quickly replied with, there is a difference. Much like the situation you find yourself in, you aid him but his goals were ones you could not support. There was a pause. Then again, I very much doubt that a king would be able to understand such a situation where there was no central figure of power.
I am a king no longer. Artoria grunted in response. And my kingdom does not exist. My own opinion on the state of the world is no longer one of relevance. I exist as a servant to be used by my master and my lance wielded to crush opposition.
Whether or not you are a king, the mentality remains. You cannot ever dismiss what you were and therefore you cannot understand how one with his power and his desire cannot grasp the concept of leadership. She chortled, his stunned silence when he failed to understand the very concept of holding power over another was enough for you to realize this, wasn't it? It is not different to having a child for a master. Artoria coldly responded with as her arms uncrossed, he could not even grasp the concept of having enemies who would oppose his ideals. Whether or not he could achieve this utopia of his, it would have been doomed for failure without anyone to control it. His own race would never accept it. Well, yes. Akal wryly nodded her head, and tempering them has taken much of my time.
I suspected as much. Artoria nodded her head. You did not leave the tree since my summoning and all combat was left in my hands. You have been curbing the impulses of the dragons to make them more tranquil.
The keen mind of a ruler. Akal chuckled at the Black Knightess, but yes. If his own race rebelled against his desire from the very beginning, he would have shut down and been unable to comprehend why. Therefore I had to have them play the part for the time being and his presence helped to keep the dragons in control. The wyverns listened to me, as they would their mother.
And if you were to shut down, then this entire singularity would collapse into chaos. Yes. Akal grimly nodded her head. Though I wonder what he shall say when he comes back. She turned her head skywards, which should be soon now. Artoria figured as much, considering Calamate made no effort to conceal his magical energy and had been charging towards their location for some minutes now. The passing of the storm and the rising sun helped to illuminate him against the backdrop of the sky. His growing humanoid form heading straight for the pair. Calamate abruptly halted in the air, his wings spreading wide and slowing his momentum down instantly before he beat them several more times to lower himself to the ground before he landed upon the snow with a gentle thud. His head stared at Artoria for a moment, then drifted to Akal where he paused at seeing the current mess she was in. What are you doing? Getting clothes. Akal explained as though she wasn't stripping bodies for their possessions. Calamate hummed at her, before turning his attention back to Artoria. The Lancer noted that his gaze seemed much sharper than it had before, as if the subtle fog of doubt had been lifted from his sight. Regardless, it is fortunate you are both here. It will save me having to repeat myself. He spoke in a slow tone before turning his attention towards the Arctree. I understand now. I know why I hated those human creations, those cities the Lightkin built. Why I was obsessed with creating a world free of disparity. Artoria remained silent, while Akal was slowly growing a proud smile. Calamate turned back to Artoria, gathered the dragons and led them out.
We are going to kill everything that lies in our path. He raised his hand, but we shall not destroy, I am going to take it back. I understand what I want, what I need is a fair chance. He turned around, humans and the light kin, they stole our chance for true development before it ever had a chance to take off. Our chance to build something, to make something, of ourselves was lost but now.
He raised both his arms and spread them wide. Now I am going to find that chance. I'm going to do what our race never could. I'm going to give us more than mere existence. He turned back around, his mouth curled up into a sharp grin. I'm going to give us the chance to live.
Calamate pointed at a call, that is what I shall do. I shall grant us, all dragons, the future that was denied to us from the very start. I will take our fair chance back and turn this land into our kingdom. He looked skywards. That is my ideal, that is what I will strive for. I will bring our race into the world and fashion our own history.
Artoria remained silent for a moment before she responded. I see. Her eyes slowly turned towards a call. A better ideal than what you had before, and when you take this new kingdom of yours. Calamate paused. When that happens, I want to see what sort of future we can build. What type of people we will become, what we will make. His hands clenched into fists. I am proof enough that we can grow. The dragons of this land were denied their own land as well. Therefore I shall carve out one for them, for the sake of both our worlds. Artoria knew the dragons had long since retreated to the reverse side of the world, but Calamate was correct in the sense that there had never been a kingdom of dragons. Still, building a new kingdom was a better plan than trying to make everyone equal when such a thing was impossible from the outset. I will start building this future now, and will fight for it with every fiber of my being. He lowered his arms to his side. That is what I am, the calamity that paves the way for new growth. A pause before he spoke again. I believe, no, I know this is a much superior ideal than before. A call clapped lightly. It is a wish of your own making, and whether it is correct or not, I shall be there to support you. Calamate wordlessly nodded his head before turning to Artoria expectantly. I am your servant summoned to fulfill your will. If your wish is to become a king, then that is your wish and I shall comment no further upon it. She narrowed her eyes. Though you have much to learn of command before you can become a king. Then I shall rely upon you for that guidance. Calamate replied after a moment of silence before his eyes closed and he leaned his head back. The future that awaits me at the end of this journey. That is what I want us to live. And, Calamate. You speedrun how to have a wish. And yes, a call is sort of an OC character but not really. She is the everlasting dragon in the first game who made the path of the dragon faith and lasted until the final game, in my own head canon, as the mother of dragons. Basically the giant mountain-sized dragon at Archdragon Peak in the distance. It fits with Archdragon Peak also being a place where the path of the dragon is followed. Anyway, stats for Calamate. Oh yeah, if you wanted reference for a physical appearance just look at the black dragon set from Dark Souls 2 but, you know, pitch black and with Calamate's actual head. Stats for a call will come later. Calamate Servant, Berserker. Strength. A++ Endurance. B+ Agility. A+ Mana. A+. Luck. D Noble Phantasm. A++, Shashvata Vipatakala. A+, Anti-Army, Max Range. 500, Max Target. 1 to 40. Black Dragon who becomes the Eternal Calamity, releases a wave of dragon fire distorted by the abyss upon his enemies. Holds anti-divine properties to it. Living Calamity, X anti-unit Max Target. 1, Max Range. 0. He transforms into Calamate, the black dragon for however long the form can be sustained, which is often not long. Age of Ancients, the world unmade, A++, anti-world, anti-concept, max target. 1, max range. 0 to 5. Creation of a bounded field around himself at will, rendering all those within his field as equal. It is the removal of blessings and bonuses from people and weapons. In effect, it reduces a battle to one of just physical parameters. Personal and class skills are removed entirely from play, it is the effect of rendering the battle without disparity. However, this is a NP that Calamate cannot use often due to its considerable strain against himself. He reverts to an ordinary dragon and runs the risk of burning through his own magical energy before the battle can end. Class skills. Independent action. Untouched by the abyss, D. Calamate had already begun to mutate and fall to the abyss by the time of his death.
He was a fearsome black dragon with traces of the dark soul burrowed into him. Grants same benefits as divinity of equal rank.
Madness enhancement. X's line of thinking is utterly strange. Though he wishes to create a future for all dragons, he still cannot truly comprehend the differences between people. If you are his master, he will recognize you entirely as an equal. Which means he will just as likely issue commands and be surprised when they are not followed. Dragonkind. A plus ranked down from X due to abyssal infection.
Magic resistance, C. Personal skills. Dragon heart, a ++. He is a dragon in humanoid form. Only made this way due to his scales being formed into a suit of armor for cultists. He shaped his image as such. His magical energy is monstrous, working as a superior form of mana burst to empower his physical strength greatly.
Feared by the gods. Because he was a dragon that even an Orlando dared not provoke, his power is obvious. He has a great deal of advantage against the divine.
Mystic Eye of Calamity, X. His singular orange eye, it can project weakness onto a target just by looking at them, doubling the damage they receive from his attacks.
Ancient Dragon. A plus race of ancient everlasting dragons. Able to control lesser dragons at his leisure. Weak to dragon slayers. Summoning, I am Calamate, Bane of the gods and Dragon of Calamity, ha 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 ha. So you wish to burn something, do you? Let us see what my flames can turn to ash. Dialogue 1, To have a body like this is disconcerting to me at times. How do you get around with just 2 legs? Dialogue 2, Have you seen those? What do you call them? Gundam, looks very impressive. I wonder, ahaha. Dialogue 3, Master and Servant. We are equals. I hold no more command over you than you do over me. It is simple. Dialogue 4. If you have Elizabeth Báthory, she is a good singer, is she not? We dragons have never encountered a song, but it is amazing to behold. Why do you stare at me so strangely?
Dialogue 5. If you have Sieg. I see. He became a dragon, did he? Impressive, although he's much too timid. But he remains a dragon nonetheless. He is my kin, so I treat him as my equal. Perhaps I do have a much more favorable view of him though.
Dialogue 6. If you have Artoria Pendragon altar, little sister is as cold as usual today. Why call her little sister? She too is a black dragon poisoned by corruption to alter her form. We each hold the dark and become more human for it. Her doing so to avoid becoming divine is just more appealing. What is she if not my little sister? Dialogue 7. If you have Mordred, that temperament of yours, it is strong indeed, but I wonder, what is it aimed at? Do you have a dream of your own that you feel strongly towards? Dialogue 8. If you have the chosen undead, I owe him a great deal. Does that surprise you? I would never have understood my dream unless he had killed me and I had become this being.
Dialogue 9. If you have Nameless King, the god of war who abandoned war, I know him well. It is by his hand that my kind still lived till the end of fire. I will forever respect and resent him for that. He still stole our future, but that some of us lived at all and brought about that path to becoming a dragon is an achievement, even if there is no future in that faith. Dialogue 10. If you have Quetzalcoatl, another light kin, TCH, how many more? Wait, a divine serpent. This is, wait. Dialogue 11. If you have Melusine, another little sister, although, why does she have a jetpack? My equal, find me a contraption like hers. I wish to transform into a body of metal as well. Dialogue 12. If you have a call, little sister, in truth, we are not related in the least, but that is just what I call her. She carries the looks of us from before the beginning, but she isn't really one of the ancients. Although her path of meditation was close to our life at least. Dialogue 13. If you have Seath, the traitor, I shall rend the flesh from his scaleless hide. Dialogue 14. If you have dragon slayers. How curious, I was not expecting them to be such mild folk. I do not hate them. It is a battle for your own life, your own future. They are simply the winners in the end. Dialogue 15. If you gave Philionor, to see a cousin of mine indoctrinated into little more than a pet, the girl is innocent, but it vexes me no less. Dialogue 16. If you have Tauren. That one with the light kin within them. Yes, I know why they hate me. I didn't realize why I burned their forest down at the time, though I have heard humans are capable of such feats when envious, am I right? I will not apologize, and I doubt he would accept one even if I was inclined. The being I was then and who I am now are two different entities.
Likes, what do I like? I fight for my future and likes though, there are also those, mecha, that you call them, that intrigues me. Hates, what do I hate? Disrespect. It disgusts me, if you shall intrigue with another then it must be from a position as equals. I come from a land without disparity however. Wish for the Holy Grail? Wish? I would wish for our future but such a thing is. To take back our future would be to deny you yours and we are equals now. There is nothing worse than to treat an equal poorly. Your future is now my future, so for the Grail I would wish prosperity for both our paths.
Bond Level 1. This sense of battle is intoxicating. I feel a sense of passion with every blow that I throw. I become more invested, more willing to see where it next leads. I want to continue on. Bond Level 2. You humans call this teamwork, right? We are good at it. Though perhaps I am taking up too much of the battlefield. I'm not leaving enough for you. I shall try to split the burden between us more evenly. What do you mean you're fine with how things are? Bond Level 3. Yes, this is that weakness I have heard about. I am still unused to the idea of a lack of equality, although looking between the two of us it appears to make more sense, does it not? You cannot perform my levels of strength. I shall still view you as my equal though.
Bond Level 4. A battle for your future you say, yes, to put your entire life on the line for such a thing is common sense isn't it, although, I feel something more than investment in this. Bond Level 5. I had almost forgotten. I am part human as well, or at least I hold the touch of abyss within my spirit.
That is what grants me manifestation to begin with. I bridge the gap between human and dragon like many others, but perhaps it is why I find other humans more appealing as my equals. Because I have a part of them within me as well. It is because of humanity I can even fight for my future at all. I can fight for our future. Until the very end where neither of us can stand anymore, I will be by your side. My sibling.
Birthday. The passage of time, yes, it is confusing for me to understand. However, it is something humans celebrate, isn't it? Therefore I shall do the same. Congratulations on another year of continued life. Your future grows brighter every time. During an event. This is entertainment, right? Let's have a look. I want to see what sort of thrill this inspires within me this time. This excitement, this is what I want to experience most of all. First ascension, ascension, yes. How strange. I have trodden further into disparity yet I feel a greater sense of completion.
Second ascension. No change, I thought as much but that does not alter this inner strength. But it is for the future, so it is fine.
Third ascension. Did you get taller? Wait, my skin is, my face is. Did the abyss affect me more than usual? Fourth ascension. This form is more fitting. We really are closer to being equals now, aren't we? I can change between forms if it is more comfortable for you though. You have no problems with my human appearance? I see, that is strange to hear but at the same time it is an odd comfort for me. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook, dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.